Hello guys, welcome to my channel, and this is the second chapter of series Hyperledger Sawtooth. And in this chapter we will be bootstrapping a Sawtooth network. If you haven't seen my previous video, then you can go in the description section. There is a link for the previous video. You can watch it. So let's start. To bootstrap the network, we have some prerequisites. We should know how the Docker engine is work, and we should have a basic understanding of Docker Compose. And to bootstrap this network, I'll be using a Visual Studio Code editor. Just to give an overview, that we will be creating a one network which will have a one validator. I will add DevMode consensus engine, but there are some other like POET or PBFT that we can see in the future, or maybe if you want, then you can comment below on the comment section. I'll try to create a video for that as well. And I also will add this REST API, and we'll try to query it here using Postman or in a browser. So let's start. I'll open my terminal. For this tutorial, I'm using Docker version 19.03.30 and Docker Compose version is 1.27. Here, if you go to Hyperledger DockerHub, you may find various Docker images which is given. We are working on a Sawtooth, so here let me search, and you will also find there are some transaction processor examples also exist. Further, here I'll be using version 3.5 of Docker Compose. I create a service. So first I will need the DevMode consensus engine, which I will connect with the validator. So I define DevMode engine, and here I'll be using an image which is Hyperledger Dev Engine Rust. Okay, so I will be using this particular image. You can also check what kind of versions they have. Okay, they are latest 90, and you can also use some other. Seems like they're all same. Okay, 54. Okay, let's use this 1.2, which is also quite new and same as the latest. So I will mention 1.2, or we can use latest as well. They both are same right now if you see the date on which they are updated. So I will mention the consensus engine here, and is there any other information which they have mentioned? Okay, just a image layer that which okay. I will use Sawtooth DevMode engine, and I will mention I'm using 1.2. This engine by default exposes port 5050. You can go on their document and read about it, and I will map to the port 5050 only. So everyone has their own style of writing syntax, so you can write it in your own way. Example that you don't need this kind of braces sometime, or maybe you can just mention 5050, but I like to write it in this way, so it is more clear to me when I debug it. I will mention the container name, Sawtooth Dev Engine. Cool. And it will be depends on the validator that we will see in further. I will mention it, whatever it will depend on. It also has a entry point, which is DevMode engine Rust. I'm supposed to connect this the IP of validator. So this entry point execute this command, and you need to mention in a connect flag the IP address of a validator. Okay, so now let's add a validator. This is our consensus, and now I will add a validator. For validator, I'll be using Sawtooth validator image. Let's go on the DockerHub and see which version is available. Sawtooth validator, it's updated 11 hours ago. Okay, you can also go on this website and look for the document. I'll use this Hyperledger Sawtooth validator, and in fact you can see the different versions. Okay, for this also the latest is 1.2, or we can, yeah, it's the same as I've checked it before. So I will use validator 1.2, and here I will give a container name and say it validator, and this validator expose port 4004. I'll map it with the same 4004. I expect that you are aware that how you map the port. This is the expose port, and here this port which is your local machine is listening. Okay, so I'll give a command. This support bash as well, so you can, after running, you can get into the container and run the same command, but I will mention it while bootstrapping. I mention here, I first check either any keys exist for the validator or not, because else we don't need to generate a new key if it exists. So I'll go on the etc Sawtooth and keys and check for the validator private key if it exists. So if it doesn't exist, because I mentioned the not flag, if it doesn't exist, then I will generate a new key by calling DM. This is a Sawtooth batch. Now here I will generate a key. You can also go to the website and look for this flag, what kind of commands are available. I'll just give the name my key, yep, and I set the genesis block, and I give the path of the key. It's generated under the Sawtooth, and the name of the key my key, and this private key. Now I will create a new proposal and I mention my key here. Along with that, I have to mention which consensus algorithm I'm using. So as I mentioned, that we will be using a DevMode engine. So I will just type the name of algorithm dot name it. You can also, there is an API available, you can call or set this using the APIs, but here I am just bootstrapping with the default parameters. As a default parameters, I can also set this consensus version, and I will give it's a 0.1 for this, and as an operation I mention config dot patch with the DM genesis. Just mention the configuration of a genesis and the config patch. Okay, so this might look a bit complicated, but really it's very straightforward. You can go to the website and look. So here what I'm doing, So here, when you install this, so this is a Sawtooth admin CLI, and here I'm using this keygen. It is to generate the keys for the validator to use when signing the block. Here I've generated the key, and this Genesis is basically to create a Genesis patch file for initializing the validator. And apart from that, I just mentioned that which kind of algorithm it should use and what version it will be. This you can change when you want, and this it's based on I'm using DevMode because I have a DevMode engine connected. I'll show you like how I will configure it and map this engine with this validator. But if you have some other, then you can give a name, and there are also some APIs available to configure it manually using some kind of using JSON payload and create and change this configuration. Okay, so now this is an if condition. It will check either the key exists or not. If it exists, then it will create. Then the Sawtooth validator will start. I will mention this flag, and I will map the endpoint. I always make this mistake of endpoint. It listen to the TCP protocol, and I will give the name of the service, and in real world it will be an IP, but here, as you know, the Docker Compose by itself map the IP to specific service name that you will give. So you can map the service name, and the Docker will replace this as an IP internally. So I will just mention the validator. It will listen to the 8080, and I will bind it with the component TCP with the 404 with the default internal port. I will be binding the network because this is what the other system will use the specific port to make a P2P connection. It's 8800. Okay, it's also 8800. And I will bind the consensus. And I will mention TCP, it's in a local, so I will mention the port, and my consensus engine is working on a 5050. Great, so we have created a validator, and here this validator Great, so here we have a bootstrapping the Sawtooth validator. We mentioned some configuration like on which endpoint and how we are binding with the consensus and the network. You can also go on the document. I will leave the link in the description, so you can go and look about what kind of flags the Sawtooth validator supports. So here we can connect, and first it will be depend on this validator. I will change it to the validator, and here I'll mention the IP validator is validator and listening to port 5050. Okay, so now I will go to the terminal and try to bootstrap. Before that, I'll make sure there isn't any container running. Okay, so Docker Compose, I mentioned the file and up, and I will build it as well. Okay, so now it's created. Great, so it is working. We can go and check here. So okay, so there is one consensus engine is running on this particular port and the validator. Great, so let's add a REST API interface as well. So if we go to their website, in the Docker Hub, and check for the Sawtooth REST API here, so we have an image available. I'm sure it will be 1.2. So I'll mention one more service. I'll name it REST API, I will be using an image version 1.2. You can mention latest, doesn't matter here. It's the same. I'll mention the container name. So it's a REST API, and by default, if you go on the website, it's mentioned that it's posing on 8008. 8008, and I will map to, just for demonstration, I'll map it to the 8800. And this REST API depends on Validator. Why? Because the API is listening and connecting or submitting the data to the validator. Great. There is also an entry point. I mentioned Sawtooth REST API. This is a CLI. You can go there and type the same, but it's better to mention it as an entry point. And I'll mention validator. And the validator is listening on 4004, and I will bind it with the REST API interface. And it's listening on 8008 internally, and this will be unless. Perfect. Great. So now let's stop the container. And we will try to restart the container because we have added this REST API. Let's rebuild it, and now it also, okay, there is some unknown flag. Okay, I mentioned this double V, so it should be just a single V. Sorry, no, it's just a single dash. This is the flag option that I'll change. Now let's retry. It takes some time to stop. I will rebuild it. Okay, now the REST API is created a handlers for this, and now we can say it's already started here. Go and see here, it's running on 8008. Let's make a query and check either it is working or not on 8008 and check the status. Okay, it is up. So it is listening to this, and the link for the status is fair enough. So great. So now we have bootstrapped the network and connected the REST API. And if we go to this specification, we can check what kind of APIs are available. And here we can check the APIs available for this, and we will use this API to develop the application. Great, so this is it for the tutorial. If you like the video, then please follow the channel and don't forget to subscribe, or if you have any questions, you can ask me on the comment section, and I will try to provide the source codes on the GitHub. So the source code are provided here. If you wanted to know more about that, how you can plug in some other consensus algorithm in the network, then please let me know on the comment section. I'll try to create one video for that as well. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.